members of the Gauteng Provincial Legislature present here, the Executive Mayor of the City of Joburg, Councillor Jeff Makubo, the Executive Mayor of Sedibeng, Councillor Busisiwe Modisakeng, Executive Mayor of Westrand, Councillor Boy, it's not longer Councillor Boy, I think it's written incorrectly. The Speaker of the City of Joburg, Councillor Nongeba Mdwele, the Speaker of Sedibeng, Councillor Andiso Musai, the Speaker of the Westrand, Councillor Ntunzi, the Municipal Council representatives of the City of Joburg, Sedibeng District, the Westrand District municipalities, and the local municipalities here present, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, members of the National Council of Provinces. Good morning to you all. Program Director, it is with pleasure that I once again welcome to you to this round of Gauteng Roadshow of the review of the Women's Charter. On the 14th of October 2020, we hosted the same session with the cities of Tshwane and Ekurhuleni. And today we're engaging the City of Joburg, Sedibeng, and the Western District municipalities for the same purposes of providing a platform for Gauteng residents to participate in the remarkable 25-year review of the Women's Charter. I'm sure you will agree with me, Deputy Chair, the chairperson of the session, that we need to do that because the Women's Charter was adopted in 1954, but in our new democracy, our parliament actually adopted the same charter. And we also know that it needs to be reviewed because of the gaps that are presented by the new environment under which we are operating. And this review comes at a time when South Africa is facing the scourge of gender-based violence and femicide, especially in Gauteng. We are facing an increase in the femicide cases. Almost every day, wake up to the news of a woman or a girl child brutally abused and killed. It is with a heavy heart to mention that the perpetrators are amongst us. They are our sons, brothers, uncles, fathers, neighbors, and colleagues. And very seldom we hear of those that have been brought to book. This tells us of the sleeplessness of the toil that we as women go through to ensure safety of our fellow men. This is not to negate that men too do get subjected to violence and abuse by their partners. However, we're at the pivotal moment for women's rights. For many years, women have been calling for their right to equality. If we could tour the books of history just a bit, I will remind you that the first Women's Charter was adopted in 1954, and today we're slightly more than 25 years since the adoption of the second Women's Charter for effective equality in 1994. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, you will agree with me that the road has been too long and women have been tirelessly telling their story and shaking their pillars of patriarchy. Not so long ago, Gauteng met another milestone when President Cyril Ramaphosa officially opened the victim-centric sexual offences court in the Boys and Magistrate Court. The court also offers a range of services to support survivors of gender-based violence. We therefore believe that participants from Johannesburg and those in close proximity with this court will give valuable inputs to this review session. Further counting our successes, the 3 municipalities we are hosting today and some of their local municipalities have successfully established their multi-party women's caucuses. For the benefit of participants that are not in the sector, Multi-Party Women's Caucus is a consultative forum of women parliamentarians united by a common interest in respect of the women's economic and socio-political well-being. The Gauteng legislature mobilized that each municipality, be it a metro district and local municipality, must have this structure in place. This is complemented by the Women's Sector Parliament that we host annually to provide a platform for women to share ideas, reflect on their future, and make use of the new forms of public participation and spaces for political assertion available to them. We are therefore hopeful that the experiences from these platforms will be deposited onto today's discussions. Today's review session of the Women's Charter comes at a time when a joint sitting of the President's address on the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Plan will be taking place later this afternoon. The difficulties brought upon us by the coronavirus necessitates that measures be taken promptly and decisively to ensure that none is left behind on the road to recovery. In the same breath, this session allows the Gauteng citizens to narrate the Women's Charter, also taking into stock the added disadvantages and limitations that we as women are encountering as a result of the pandemic. As I close, I wish to thank the Deputy Chairperson of the NCOP for once again affording Gauteng citizens a platform to participate in this remarkable review.
We don't hear you. Kevin, can you assist?
The microphone is open. It must be on the other side, ma'am.
Okay. Now we don't know whether she has finished. Speaker, same as if we've lost her. If that is the case, I hope I'm audible. Am I audible?
Is you audible, ma'am?
Am I audible?
By saying that in terms of the reviews or even around the clauses of the charter, where we'll be making inputs, I think at a later stage, I might come back and indicate as to which areas I think that they need to be looked into. But for now, please welcome in Gauteng. This is your place. We are here to work with our people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. There was a time that we could completely not hear you. And unfortunately, we don't have the complete message from yourself. But thank you very much for the warm welcome. In any case, with the assistance that we received from Gauteng, we know that we are very much welcome. I just want to make some opening remarks also with regards to the process so far. So, to the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, if he's present, the Speaker of the Provincial Legislature, members of Parliament, particularly the National Council of Provinces, Metro and District Municipality leadership, the representative from the FFC, States SA and the Gender Commission, distinguished guests. It is indeed an honor, I once again, to be with you at this review session of the Women's Charter of Effective Equality. This session provides Parliament with a platform for the consideration of issues of national importance. It is over the last 3 or 4 decades that women's role in history of South Africa has belatedly been given some recognition. Previously, the history of women's political organization, the struggle for freedom from oppression, for community rights, and importantly for gender equality was largely ignored. The reason for this invisibility of women was largely due to conventional patriarchy. In other words, it was the men who had authority in society. Women were seen as subordinate to men. The role of women was primarily seen as a domestic one, which included child rearing and seeing to the well-being, feeding and care of the family. They were not expected to concern themselves with matters outside their homes, which was perceived as a domain for men. Soon after the unveiling of the ANC, like the Honorable Speaker have already said, the Women's National Coalition was formed and launched in 1992. Also, after the CODESA negotiations, there was a complete charter in 1994 that was adopted and handed over to President Mandela on the 9th of August. I think I wanted to bring in this so that we can understand also the context within which National Women's Day was actually conceived. Now, most of the issues within the Women's Charter was incorporated into the Constitution and in particular into the Bill of Rights. And that made South Africa to rectify various pieces of legislation internationally and regionally for the furtherance of gender equality. Part of this efforts of the South African state to address the implementation of these laws and treaties was the development of policies to ensure that equality measures were operationalized. The creation of laws, unfortunately, does not necessarily translate into the elimination of gender discrimination. Hence, the feminization of poverty still remains as a significant challenge in women's economic empowerment. Gender equality in the labor market persists, and the pace and scale of transformation towards realizing women's economic empowerment has been unacceptably slow. Women's mass entry into the workforce has produced significant attitudinal changes, and the South African government has put in place the necessary legislative measures to combat inequality. Nevertheless, sexist preconceptions remain deeply rooted. Despite the legal advances and the shift in attitudes in recent years, there remains a wide gap between women's increasing legal rights to equality and the real life situations faced by women on a daily basis. Many working women still face obstacles which prevent them from realizing their full potential. In the NCOP yesterday, we received a presentation by the Statistician General which emphasized the fact that there is definitely a gender pay gap, particularly with regards to women versus men. Since we are here today, because 2019 marked 25 years since the adoption of the Women's Charter for Effective Equality, this 25 years milestone necessitated the commencement of a process to review the entire women's regime in order for us to assess the progress that we have made towards advancing gender equality. We also seek to assess the systematic, institutional, and cultural practices that continue to impede the advancement of gender equality in South Africa, with the intention of putting in place the necessary corrective measures. The review process will assess the efficacy of structural arrangements in place, particularly as they pertain to the national gender machinery and gender responsive budgeting. This review process signifies a critical juncture in the history of our democracy, which will enable us to measure the progress we have made and engage in the battle of ideas to accelerate the implementation of gender equality policies. Distinguished delegates, I look forward to productive, fruitful, and informative discussions in advancing the women's struggle. I should say that the first session with Gauteng was extremely informative and enriching, and I wish for this to be the same. Thank you very much. We will continue with our program. Unfortunately, I received late confirmation from other members that they won't be here, so I'm going to continue with the program because it is already how we have structured it, and we won't want to embarrass people by just asking them here to do something. So we will now give over to Stats SA in the person of Mr. Neil Roo, who have been with us in this process almost right from the start, together with the Statistician General, and he will speak about poverty and inequality in the metro and districts that we are dealing with today. Over to you, Mr. Neil Roo.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Am I audible?
Very much.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Let me just share the presentation quickly. There you go. Are you seeing the presentation, colleagues? Ma'am?
It's clear. It is on the screen.
Lovely. Thank you very much, ma'am. Yes, today we're doing the presentation for the city of Johannesburg, Sedibeng, and Westrand, which is in some regards probably an odd choice in a sense that we're talking about probably the largest, one of the largest metros in the country, and also then two smaller district municipalities. And of course, what I share is that all three of them are in Gauteng. As always, we start out with a broader global picture, and we're looking at South Africa's population, which was estimated at about 60 million people. As you can see, 59.6 million people in the mid-year estimate of 2019. Now, just to have a look at the picking order, Gauteng, of course, is the largest province by far in South Africa. 1 in 4 people in South Africa lives in Gauteng, 26%. That's about 15.5 million people of the South African population. And of course, a large part of these people are migrants and people that came from elsewhere, because Gauteng, together with Western Cape, are also the largest migrant receiving provinces in the country, historically as well as at this present moment. When we look at a distribution of the population within Gauteng, Of course, looking at the two big metros and then also, or the three big metros, I apologize, and also the two districts, one sees that about 38% of the total Gauteng population lived in the city of Johannesburg, the broader municipal area. And then in the two districts that we're talking about, Sedibeng and the Westrand, we're only talking about 12% combined. So a completely different dynamic, a much smaller district than the other three metros we spoke about. In terms of the population, again, we see that slightly more than 50% of the population are male, as opposed to 49.9%. It's almost even. However, that is slightly different from what you'll normally find in normal population distribution. This is probably due to the high in-migration that I spoke about earlier. Because although migration patterns have normalized in the sense that more and more females are also migrating these days, there are still slightly more male migrants in the population, particularly if they migrate for economic reasons, as they do to Gauteng. Looking at the distribution for the three section or areas that we're looking at, you can see that in the city of Johannesburg, it seems more normalized, the male-female ratio. However, it's particularly in the Westrand and in Sedibeng where there are more males than females. And this, again, as I've mentioned, flows out of migration patterns that are preferential to men. A very important slide is looking at how the population is distributed across this particular population. And we're looking at three broad groups. We're looking at elderly people over 60 years of age, children under 15 years of age, and then we're also looking at youth and adults between 15 and 60 years, between 59 years then. And as you can see here, Gauteng has got the smallest percentage of elderly people, about 8.5%. Which by itself is probably a bit misleading because this is 8.5%, of course, of 15.6 million. So it's a very large population. But be as it may, it's a very small percentage. Important thing to realize, however, is that more than 2/3 of the Gauteng population are between 15 and 59. In other words, people in their working ages, people that are looking for work, that in many respects migrated to Gauteng to look for work. And then, of course, you know, that is not strange given the fact that Gauteng is also the driver of the South African economy in many regards. Inversely, of course, we see that only 24% of the total population are children. And a lot of reasons for this. Partially, of course, it's driven by the fact that you've got a large youth and adult population. Also partially because many of the migrants don't necessarily bring their children with them. The children might stay in the areas of origin, wherever that is. In terms of living circumstances of these children, and of course, living circumstances are important in the sense that it's that the family and the household and the extended family is the place where children are nurtured and where they learn the norms and mores, and where they actually grow up as safe adults in a safe environment. We can see that in terms of how about 11% of children indicated in the previous GHS that they lived with neither their parents, neither a mother or a father, whilst about 37% lived only with the mother and about 48% lived with both. Now, after the Western Cape, these are figures with the highest percentage of children living with either both their parents or at least with the mother. As you can see, living with the father is very, very small, and it's historically also been the case. Female-led households are extremely important indicator of poverty and also hardship. As you can see, for South Africa as a whole, 40% of female-led households did not have a single employed person, compared to about 20%, 1/5 of male-led households. The situation in Gauteng is slightly better. It's very similar in terms of its distribution. You get about 12% of male-headed households where no employed person, I apologize, compared to about 28.8% of female-headed households. So it's very, very clear that female-headed households are definitely more likely probably to be poor, more likely to be dependent on grants and other kind of social assistance, remittances perhaps, as we'll see in some of the next slides. About 1/5 of the Gauteng population is considered poor, based on a lower bound poverty line. And the lower bound poverty line, as was also discussed by the SG yesterday in his presentation, is about 840 rands per person per month, so it's per capita. This is the amount of money that's necessary per person to pay for food and also for other life necessities. This slide is just to show that this lower bound poverty line is increased over time using inflation rate. But we all know that inflation rate is not always an accurate reflection everywhere in the country on what certain things cost. So this is real hardship in many regards. The good news in terms of Gauteng as a whole is that the poverty rate is much lower than that for South Africa. Whereas South African poverty rate is about 40%, it's only about 19% in Gauteng. And again, this harpers back to two things. It harpers back to the fact that Gauteng is the economic engine. Much more work and employment opportunities are created in Gauteng. But also, secondly, strangely enough, it's a selection of individuals that migrate to Gauteng, and many of them, as migrants, are normally better educated, more entrepreneurial, more innovative, looking for work, looking to create work, and then, of course, looking to create income. So that makes Gauteng and various other provinces as migrant receiving provinces much stronger in many regards. Again, though, households or the sex of the head of the household still remains a very important factor, although as you can see, less so in Gauteng than in many of the other provinces, whereas 18% of male-headed households were considered poor. It's only the case for about 20% of female-headed households. This slide, I think, is also extremely important because it shows the relationship of education to poverty. Now, as you'd expect, there's an inverse relationship. In other words, people with no schooling were much more likely to be poor than those who have higher levels of education, degrees, postgraduate degrees, etc. And of course, as people's education improves, as you can see, it seems also that people's likelihood to be in poverty also decreases. So schooling, extremely important. Now, this is, of course, looking only at the money metric poverty. Money metric poverty is poverty that's measured by looking at people's income. And for this, we normally use the income expenditure survey or the living conditions survey. But there are also other ways, of course, to measure poverty, and that's by looking at the multi-dimensional poverty index. These looking at services that government are providing that cannot always be measured in terms of financial expenses. For instance, we're looking at healthcare, and here healthcare is measured as an outcome, or the outcome is child mortality, particularly the under 5, 0 to 4. We're looking at access to education. We're looking at living standards as measured through access to electricity for lighting, heating, cooking, and also access to water, sanitation, type of dwelling people are living in, and of course then also economic activity, which is unemployment. Now the good news is that the multiple deprivation in Gauteng, of course, is much lower than that for South Africa, whereas it's 7% in 2016 for South Africa, it's only about 4.6%. It has, as for South Africa, it's also declined over time. And to a large extent, this would have been driven by employment, as you'll see in the next slide. Now, looking at the various districts here, one sees that the multidimensional poverty is highest in Ekurhuleni at 6.6%. And then for the three districts that we're talking about, Sedibeng, it's actually the lowest, 3.5%. Very similar to Gauteng, and then also in the Westrand, it's about 6.3%. All of these are still lower than the South African average. And as I've mentioned earlier, a lot of this has been driven by higher employment rates as opposed to unemployment rates, as well as probably better services that are provided because it's a much more densely populated and in many respects wealthier area. In terms of the income generated by households, I think this also comes out in this particular slide. You look, for instance, at let's perhaps look at Eastern Cape or maybe Limpopo as an example here. One sees that 43% of households, they say that salaries were their main source of income and grants were 30%. However, if you have a look at Gauteng as a whole, you see that 71% of all households indicated that salaries were their main source of income. In other words, it shows higher employment and it shows that there are employed members in households. At the same margin, you also find that remittances have decreased. In other words, these are households receiving remittances only 6%, and grants are only 9%. This again probably re-emphasizes the point that households living in Gauteng are probably not receiving remittances, they're sending remittances. But also, the other point it makes here, if you look at the 13% of other income, these are businesses and various other means of making money that are not necessarily working for somebody else. 13% of households said they received their main source of income from other source, which, like I say, is renting property or running some kind of business, which is extremely important, I think, in a country like South Africa. In terms of service delivery, we've got all the districts here, and we can see here Sedibeng formal dwellings, the highest percentage of formal dwellings, just under 87%. About 12% of households lived in informal dwellings, whilst if we have a look, for instance, at the city of Johannesburg, formal dwellings about 80%. Here we start finding that about 18%, 1 in 5 members households lived in informal dwellings. The Westrand, it's actually much more than that. It's about 22.5% lived in informal dwellings. Informal female-led households are about constant between 32 and 37% across all the districts. In terms of access to services, again, for Gauteng over time, this is access to improved sanitation. We find that Gauteng has consistently been higher than the South African average, whilst access to sanitation have actually improved in South Africa between 2002 and 2018. It's remained relatively consistent, again, as you can see here in Gauteng, between 89% and maybe 92%. Again, this was done amidst high population influx. So to some extent, this doesn't mean that nothing has been done in that period. It means that a lot has been done, and Gauteng as a province barely kept track with the high population influx and high population growth that's taking place. And this to some extent can actually be seen in access to electricity. As you can see here, Gauteng is the bottom right-hand corner, and access to electricity, and this is mains electricity, has actually declined from 87.2% to 77.7%. More households than ever are probably connected to electricity, but not all of them are officially connected to mains electricity. Some of them might be getting electricity from neighbors and from various other sources, and a lot of this actually reflects, as the heading says, in migration experience. So migration has really affected service delivery to a great extent in Gauteng, and will continue to do so into the future. When we're talking about water, we see that water services, most households have got access to water, 96% in Sedibeng, 99% in the city of Johannesburg, and 94% in Westrand. Electricity, similarly, relatively high rates. These are all electricity, not only mains electricity, as the previous slide said. And then also sanitation, improved sanitation being either flush or toilets or chemical toilets. We're talking about 92% Sedibeng, and then the lowest will be in the Westrand. I'm sorry, which also coincidentally had the highest percentage of people living in informal dwellings. Now, this is, I think, the first last slide, and this basically just shows percentage of households that participate in agriculture. Now, as you would expect in a province like Gauteng, which is largely a conglomerate, in other words, a very large urban province, you find that only less than 5% of households said they were involved in any kind of agriculture, be it, tending cattle or vegetable gardens or anything. And of course, this is normally quite related to hunger and fighting hunger as well. As you can see here, in Gauteng as a whole, about 17% of female-led households said that they ran out of money to buy food, vis-a-vis about 14.6% of male-headed households. And if you compare it across the district, city of Johannesburg, it was about 18.8% for males and 15.6%. And then for the Westrand, which of course we also saw was probably the poorer of the three, 20.4% of male-led households, female-led households compared to 15.2% for male-led households. So this is probably better off than many other districts in the country, but probably by itself still a very poor statistic. In terms of the percentage of households that suffered or say they're suffering from hunger, we find again Gauteng is probably doing the second best, if I can call it that, from all the provinces, but still worse than Limpopo. About 8% of female-led households say they suffered from hunger, as opposed to 5.2% of male-led households. And Limpopo is the only province that does better, but also if you remember back, if we go to the previous slides, you'll see that Limpopo is also the province with in which almost 24%, more than 24% of households are involved in some kind of agriculture. And then the last slide, the last slide before the final slide is we also asked people whether they've ever experienced any partner violence. And we find that in Gauteng, which is here, 8% of them, of the female respondents said that they've ever experienced sexual violence, and another 17.7% said that they've ever experienced physical violence. I always say, and I re-emphasize that these figures are probably underestimate because people are in the kind of service that we do not always completely open and truthful about this. It does give us a very good indication of the quantum as well as the changes over time. And this is, of course, unacceptable as it is. And with that, I thank you very much for the presentation, for the time to present. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Mr. Neil Rowe. We really also appreciate the fact that you are always willing and ready to be with us in the Women's Chapter review sessions. We will continue with our presentations, and we will now go to Ms. Namasonto, Commissioner Namasonto Mazibuko, for the Commission of Gender Equality. Continue with the presentations.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, honorables. Thank you very much for this opportunity. This morning, as we are having our presentation, it will be done by the Provincial Manager, Cge Mandate. Thank you. Over to you, Cge.
Good morning. Let me switch on my video for a moment so that you can see who you are talking to. My name is Cge Mandate.
Can I please request that you put the video on, because we also have live streaming and we will also have a broadcast later on our parliamentary channel. So, you may continue.
With the network. Thank you so much. I'm now back. Can I also share the screen so that can someone share the screen from that side? I have sent my presentation to Kevin and the rest because I'm unable to share from my side.
Kevin?
In the meantime, I'll be running through. I've got a hard copy with me. In the meantime, they're trying to click. I'm going to present the work that we do in Gauteng province, the work that is guided by the Cge Mandate. And I'll go straight to the Cge Mandate. In terms of Section 187 of the Constitution, it requires the Cge to promote respect for and the protection, development, and attainment of gender equality. The Cge Act number 39 of 1996 further mandates the Cge to monitor and evaluate legislation, policies, and practices of the state, statutory bodies, and the private sector, as well as indigenous, customary, and religious law and practices. The Cge is empowered to do research and make recommendations to Parliament, receive and investigate complaints. You can go to slide 5, or will I be able to? Can you move to slide, I think I'm on slide 3, because I don't see the arrows here. And then the PEPURA also give us additional powers for us to institute proceedings in equality courts in instances of discrimination on the basis of gender. And then I'm going to give a snapshot on how far are we as the CGE in terms of monitoring the implementation and progression of the Women's Charter in Gauteng. I will specifically speak to not all the articles, but Article 2, 6, and 10, which I have clustered together because they are intertwined. The CGE is expected to make inputs to bills. So in the previous financial year, it made inputs to customary initiation bill, where you find that there were a lot of gender-related violations when, especially during initiation school, especially with regard to illegal initiation schools. There are a lot of gender violations. Some children are being taken or rather abducted to go to such initiation schools, and then there is no proper monitoring of such schools, whether they are in line with the Department of Health prescript in terms of doing medical male circumcision and so on and so on. So the CG will make inputs to such bills to ensure that there are no gender violations, and then the informed consent principle is applied as and when they recruit children to be part of these schools. And then the other bill also, it was the sexual offences bill and the domestic violence bill. So whenever there are these inputs made to Parliament with regard to this bill, we also update the kind of information or education programs that we give or provide to our constituency. So as soon as we are done with the bills, we also go out to the community to say, these are the current developments in terms of this bill, so that we always give them updated information, especially in terms of GBV and femicide. So when we do this education, we make sure that our education programs are embedded or are derived from the legislation that we have that are governing your GBVF, your sexual offences, and so on and so on. So that whenever we educate our people, they are aware of their rights, they are aware of the legislation that is protecting them, they are aware of the channels that they can utilize in terms of trying to access justice in the issue that they will be experiencing, or rather the violation that they will be experiencing. And then we enhance access to justice by monitoring SAPs. For instance, you find that there is a case of GBV reported to SAPs. It's taking long to be resolved. Reason being, you find that there are no rape kits in police station. You find that the DNA that should be submitted to court, they are either being delayed or rather they are being lost, for instance. So those are the kind of things that make the GBV cases to drag long, and then they, at the same time, they are also not abiding to the victim charter principles. And then you find that when a person is going there to report a crime or a GBV case, the person is being exposed to secondary victimization, things like what were you wearing and so on and so on. So those are the kind of monitoring that we do, and we also ensure that where we identify gaps, we ensure that we even provide gender sensitization for the SAPS officials to say, yours is to open the case, but not to be playing a social worker, because some of them are being returned home to say, you must go and talk as a family and so on and so on. And then the next day, that person is murdered. So those are the kind of things that we're trying to check with the edge. And we even did monitoring of the rape kits to say, in each and every police station, do we have rape kits? What is the sampling block? And we try to make sure that we make them aware of the importance of having sufficient evidence for these court cases to be resolved within the given time, or rather within the reasonable time. And then again, we have done investigative hearings on shelters. And then we found that when we do those hearings, we sample shelters around South Africa, and then we brought them before the commission to say, guys, as and when you provide these services to our victims, are you abiding to the victims' charter? Are you sensitive to their needs? What is the issue? Because we even received complaints from other people to say, I went to this shelter, I was turned away. I went to this shelter, I went to bed hungry, and so on and so on. And then they forwarded to us that they don't have sufficient funding their facilities are not that friendly. Sometimes they don't even have enough beds, and then they cannot take someone and make that person sleep on a bed. That's why they will send them away. And then we also encourage them to say, can't you have a networking system where you know if you are full, you'll be referring to the next shelter that you within the vicinity and so on. And then they also complained about understaffing, lack of resources, including the COVID-19 PPEs, and they didn't even have protocols to, or rather the necessary equipments to do the screening, or rather to isolate and so on and so on. So, but this kind of findings were tabled. They were. The report was launched, and the engagements are continuing with the Department of Social Work, Social Development, so that they can ensure that they address the gaps that were revealed during the transformation hearings, the investigative hearings, and even during the research and investigation that was done by the legal department. And then when I go to Article 3 and 4, which is slide number 6, it's talking to economy, education, and training. Again, the commission will do a subpoena departments or rather your institution of higher learning and public sector to come before the commission to give us progress on far are they in ensuring that transformation is being implemented in those institutions. We will look into your EE implementation, if whether they are meeting the EE targets, the triple BEE, and here we've realized in some of these the departments or other private sector, they just are running after numbers. When they give tenders, you find that for women, it's only catering and maybe supplying of stationery. And then the ones that are maybe going to be emancipating these women are being given to a certain gender. So we felt, or no, guys, yes, we have to meet the targets, but look at the quality as well. The women can also build dams if you are having such a infrastructure project. So we also try to ensure that there should be equal access of these tenders as long as the women have the merits or the capacity and the expertise to do so. And then we also say again, even when you do your skills development, you may find that women are maybe sent for presentation skills, whereas males are being sent for a BSc. Can you really compare between the two? So we ensure that whenever you do this interventions, you should know that you have, your institution to say, I've got 100 engineers, but out of these 100 engineers, only 10 are females. That already tells you that when you do your skills development in the coming quarter, you should be exposing more women so that you can strike the balance. So, and also we also will check the policy environment to say, it doesn't help for us to meet the target, whereas you find there are still a lot of cases of sexual harassment. There are still a lot of cases of bullying and intimidation. So as and when we try to meet targets and to empower these people, the environment where they work, it should also be conducive. There should be measures in place to address your sexual harassment incidents and so on and so on. And then we also do GBV and sexual harassment in the Barking Institution of Higher Learning, where there are a lot of cases where students are being murdered, students are being raped. So we also put the higher education institution on the spot to say, what are you doing as the higher education? Are you having systems in place? Your sex for marks incidents and allegations, what are you doing with regard to that? Are you having psychosocial units within are you enhancing the safety of these students? And then are you ensuring that whenever you hire within the university, your chancellors, your deans, and so on and so on, are you gender sensitive areas? And when you do that, and whenever you are skilling, are you sensitive to gender? So those are the kind of things that we request. And we ensure that if they don't have such, we give them recommendations and we put again the timelines to say, during this period, you should be able to say you've moved from whatever you had and try to improve in terms of gender. And then we keep on monitoring. And then whenever you also recruit these learners because they are doing the career expos and wherever, are you ensuring that you make these children aware that we are having faculties of science and engineers, but we are struggling to get women applying to these faculties and encourage them to apply in such faculties so that they can get access or rather equal opportunity as well. And then the Article 11, which is health, we find a lot of complaints or other allegations that people are denied access to health. For instance, in two facilities we observed through media, and we even received complaints that the woman went to the facility, she was due to give birth, and then she was turned away because she was over 40, and they didn't have the doctor in the facility to can do whatever the service that the women required. And then when the women tried to get another taxi to the hospital she was being referred to, she unfortunately gave birth at the gate of the hospital. So those are the kind of the things that we will put the Department of Health on the spot, and then try to find the internal processes, if whether they are doing disciplinary, and ensure that there's proper redress, and then they prevent further incident of such nature. And then because basically they were supposed to be maybe arranging an ambulance for these women so that they can transfer to the nearest facility which they think has the expertise that the women required, but that didn't happen. And then during lockdown, we had a lot of TOP allegations and incidents and complaints to say that I went to facility A and then I was trying to access termination of pregnancy services. I was turned away because it's locked down, because they're prioritizing COVID more than whatever. So with the intervention of the legal officer, the CGE, and then those kind of clients were able to get the access to that kind of service. And then again, we've got issues in terms of sexual reproductive health rights. We find that when you go the transport tax that was imposed made people to miss their appointments, or rather the contraceptives or the comorbidities that they want with regard to sexual reproductive health were not in stock because there were disruption of the transporting the logistics of these medications to various facilities. So you find some of them will make quite sure that they go to this appointment, but they find that there is no treatment because we didn't receive stock last week due to this lockdown. So there were a lot of issues with regards to the services. There were a lot of disruptions. And again, there were lack of access to fertility treatments for transgender because they will be wanting to move from this gender to the other. So they are getting the treatments from different facilities. And there was also a disruption with regard to that. And then that made the CGE to do a stakeholder engagement to try and explore further what are the issues and what can be done to ensure that the services are afforded to our citizens. And then I will go to the Cge provincial programs, specific programs that we do in trying to ensure that we mainstream gender within Gauteng. We do that by introducing gender mainstreaming to municipalities. And then in this instance, I will be talking to your city of Joburg and the Mogale City Municipality. And then we also do that by public education and outreach, which involves stakeholder engagements, legal and outreach clinics. And then it will be a complaints handling and management, where I will give you just the highlights of the cases that we monitor through courts. And then gender mainstreaming, one will ask, well, what is this gender mainstreaming you're talking about? It is simply a process of assessing the implications of women, men, and the LGBTIQA+ of any planned action, including legislation, policies, or programs in all areas and at all levels. It is a strategy for making women's, men's, as well as the LGBTIQ+ consent and experience an integral dimension of the design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of policies and programs in all political, economic, and societal spheres. The ultimate goal there is to achieve gender equality. And then a summary of the GM process that we undergo with these municipalities is this. We first do a gender audit. We pull the IDP, we analyze the IDP, and in most instances, you find that the IDP is not gender sensitive because it's just an umbrella document that the gender or transformation is not finding expression within that document. And then when they do the review, we'll just make inputs to say, if you want to achieve or if you want to implement a program, it should be there even from the start of your IDP. So if you're saying you're going to include it somewhere when you do operations, it has a great chance of being missed. So the best way is to include it from the beginning. And then you do a gender audit, and there's also a gender audit tool that we give to these municipalities to say, fill this audit tool where you will be giving us an idea of how far are you in terms of EE skills, etc., and then we analyze and we come up with the findings and the gaps to say, these are the findings, and then this is what you need to do for you to address the gaps. And then that's where they will do their planning, the mainstreaming strategy, the gender policy they implement, and then we're going to do monitoring and evaluation of that, and then regular reports. And then with regard to the city of Joburg specifically, IDP was analyzed and the CGE was part of the review process during June. And then the IDP, for once, it captured GBV as a program for intervention. And then the audit tool was responded to and received, analyzed, and the findings were communicated. And then some of the findings that were found there was lack of representativity, insensitive policies, or lack of gender integration in these policies. And then you find that if gender is being done, or rather is being mainstreamed in this municipality, it is not that fully mainstreamed, or it is regarded as an add-on, whereas gender is a right and then it should be implemented in each and every program of the municipality. And then, but the city of Joburg, when the findings were communicated to them, they made sure that they do a plan, they do an implementation plan to say, this is what we're going to do in terms of equity. We're going to be, they even drafted the succession plan. And then we found that they didn't have some of the policies. So as I'm speaking now, they are busy with their gender policy, they are busy with their sexual harassment policy. So they are trying to move, even though we know that COVID has disrupted a lot of things. And then they have done relaunched their city's gender steering committee, which comprises of gender focal persons for different departments so that it can be mainstreamed in all areas. And then they also established a sexual harassment task team. So we are constantly in good working relations with the city, and then they are making progress in terms of gender mainstreaming. And then I'm gonna zoom to Mogale City, local municipality. The first letter was written to the municipal manager on the 26th of July, 2019. And then we didn't find any response. We didn't find any joy from the processes. And then we kept on reminding them, we kept on writing emails to them. And on the 23rd of September 2020, we got to communicate with the gender focal person of that municipality, but there is no progress in terms of gender mainstreaming. The focal person alluded that the gender and social programs are not seen as strategic programs. They are not seen as a program of importance, so they are not even included. And to add on that, even the senior management performance agreement doesn't include gender as a key responsibility area. So there is a law and the GFP are there, but they are not being recognized. So gender is just something that is shelved somewhere. So we will request our political principals to maybe talk to the mayor and so on, so that we can unlock the obstacles that are there and ensure that gender is mainstreamed within that municipality. Let me not talk to the benefits of gender mainstreaming. I think the deputy chair has already alluded to that when she was making introductory notes towards this session that we're having today. And then in terms of public education, we are doing stakeholder management because we are having a limited staff complement. So we make use of the stakeholders that are doing gender programs, or rather their mandate is to ensure gender equality is achieved in the province, to push our business with them. So whenever we equip these employees of this organization, be it your Sonke, we know that when they go to their respective areas, they will be able to push the mandate further. So that's what we do. And then I've listed here the kind of stakeholder engagements that we've done at City of Joburg. We've done a stakeholder where we explored sexual and gender-based violence in Gauteng and the role of the different departments or other organization in trying to address that. We were speaking to the social and security cluster, and then we did a dialogue on challenges facing young women in the 21st century. That was done in Guatemala. And then we done a community dialogue with the farming and agriculture community towards your Bronco spread, where we found there were a lot of violations of gender rights for women and men who are working in these farms. And then we ensured that there were services, because they didn't even get services like your health services there. And then we ensured that we involved Vets RHI so that they can provide service on that day. And then let me quickly rush to the legal clinics. The legal clinics is what we've done. We are doing in different communities within Gauteng, where we go there and educate the constituency about the mandate of the CGE, about the legislation that I was talking to. But it starts first by conducting a situational analysis together with the stakeholders within that community to say, what are the issues of this community? And you find that they will say, we're having a lot of GBV, we are having a lot of maintenance issues, we're having a lot of SAPs that is not responding to us whenever we need it. And then we make sure that when we do this engagement, we will bring together SAPs and rather your maintenance people to come and talk to these people and provide service on that day. So the rationale for conducting the outreach and advocacy and legal clinic is to educate and inform communities on legislation relating to gender justice, equality, and gender equality, and also to provide legal advice or make legal aid available to indigent persons who experience any form of gender discrimination in line with the Commission's mandate. So now we have done this kind of legal clinics, and we were trying in all the legal clinics that we did to respond to the issues that were picked up during the situation analysis. So we've done one in Primrose Magaus Informal Settlement, which is City of Ekurhuleni, Aga Social Men's Forum in Soshanguve, the city of Tshwane, and then in Niger, Manseville, Krugersdorp, and then Refilwe, which is Kalinen. And then in terms of complaints handling, the kind of complaints that we receive, I've already mentioned a few in my previous slides, but we get the nature of cases that we receive includes gender-based violence, discrimination, sexual offenses, sexual harassment, domestic violence, maintenance and divorce, etc. And then we also conduct systemic investigation on the status of shelters, which I have already alluded to, and then the kind of cases that we monitor. Since I have already spoken that there are a lot of delays through the judicial system where you find that your cases are not being resolved because it's either the rape kit has been lost, the JAD8 was not filed properly, and so on. So we monitor these cases. We are in close contact with the SAPs to say, guys, there is a case that we will be monitoring. How far are you? And then have you submitted everything to the magistrate courts and so on? And then while doing that, they ensure that they abide or rather they adhere to the timelines that they put for themselves in trying to submit the documents that are required to the courts. And then we through the fact that we run a round of monitoring of rape cases, and then rape kits, and then we find that most of the police stations now are aware and understand the importance of having a rape kit in each and every police station, so that whenever there is a complaint with regards to GBV, there are resources to be able to help such an individual. And then we are monitoring cases in Palm Ridge, Springs, Johannesburg, and then Pretoria. So we are, even at Orange Farm, we are monitoring such cases. So we are doing, we are all over. We are not saying it should be this municipality. Whenever we hear of a case, even on media, we rush to the police station and try to find the details of that case and start monitoring thereof. I think I've reached the end of this presentation. I thank you.
Thank you. It was a very elaborate presentation and also really covered the issues that we want the CGE to keep themselves busy with, and we experience appreciation. I think you were very well prepared for the session. It is like what the commissioner did indicate last week. So thank you very much for the presentation. We are continuing. It's just that we just have the morning, because in the afternoon there is a joint sitting in the parliament. We are going to continue, and we will ask Ms. Nomonde Madukula from the Finance and Fiscal Commission. They have lost the chairperson last week, and our condolences accompany them. Nomonde, over to you, my dear.
Thank you, ma'am. I'll also pass the condolences. Thanks, Kevin. The next slide. My presentation outline will look at the role of the Financial and Fiscal Commission, what the Commission, the research that the Commission has done on gender budgeting, as well as the recommendations, as well as concluding remarks. My next slide, Kevin. I will just highlight here that the main role of the FFC It is a constitutional body established in terms of the Constitution. Its role is to actually make recommendation to government, to parliament, and all the other organs of state on financial and fiscal matters. Next slide, Kevin. Pass this one, Kevin. Thank you. I will just highlight here on what a colleague from Status Aid have highlighted, that indeed it is true what he's saying, that despite government commitments to gender equality through various policy and legislative measures, including the anti-discrimination legislation and employment equity policies, there are still unacceptable levels of gender inequality in the country. The Black female-headed households are the poorest, and they are the ones who are taking the brunt to this compared to the male. The next slide. Next slide, because Neil has touched on this one. Thank you. Yes, you can leave it here. In light of the background, FFC is of the view that one avenue that should receive a greater emphasis is the intergovernmental fiscal relations system. The FFC is of the view that a successful IGFR system should be sensitive to the needs of women and contribute to moving them out of poverty. In order to be able to do that, innovations in policy design and implementation are required so as to ensure gender-sensitive resource allocation. In this instance, the FFC conducted a study to assess the gender responsiveness of municipal budgeting process. The study, it had a two-pronged approach. It looked at the IDPs of municipalities, which were selected randomly, and also case studies, which included Gauteng, Western Cape, Eastern Cape, and Free State. The particular focus on the 4 sectors in the case studies was to look at the local economic development initiatives or program, the water and sanitation programs, the early childhood development, as well as the housing infrastructure. The reason for that, we know that these indicators, they do indeed alleviate the plight of women in making sure that their situation becomes improved. The next slide. Just to say, from those randomly selected municipalities, as well as the case study actually, it included the Westrand municipality, as well as in terms of the municipalities, it was Merafong municipalities that was part of the sample. What was found in the results actually of those municipalities that I've mentioned in Gauteng, before I go to the general findings, we found that out of those municipalities, the Westrand actually, in terms of their IDPs, you find that they have programs in place on gender equity. They had programs in place on LED. They had programs in place on ECD. The same with Merafong municipality. They also had, as well as Mohale, they also had programs in place. What we find what was lacking in these municipalities was the more of on gender equity, on gender equality, because on equity you also find that they also indicated that they do have higher women as well, but it was more about gender equality where their score was 0, so that women also have equal opportunities. So in terms of the other which I can call them indicators, that we asked them that, do you have any LED programs in your municipalities? They indicated. How many women do you employ? They will indicate that. So what was the main issue in these municipalities was just the lack of mainstreaming of all the programs into their policies so that it can be institutionalized and implemented across. So in terms of the general findings of the IDP scans in general from the municipality, it was found that there is lack of gender mainstreaming and women empowerment as an approach by the municipalities. There is lack of gender disaggregated data, where you find that even if municipalities report that they have so much women or so much men, They just use it for population purposes only, instead of also using the data in terms of their gender mainstreaming projects. As I've indicated, it's more about equity versus equality. As I've indicated that the Westrand district, the Merafong and the Mohale, it was more about the equity instead of as well taking into account equal opportunities. There was also weak translation of gender equality commitments into fiscal commitments. What do I mean by this? Is that the integrated development plans of the municipalities showed little evidence of the manner in which the IDP planning processes and budget offices have budgeted for the gender mainstreaming. The next slide. In terms of the case studies that I've also indicated earlier that the study looked at, what the case study found in these provinces that I've highlighted earlier was also similar to what the IDPs of the municipalities have, that there was poor translation of the national gender on women empowerment and the gender equality into local government programs. The data on sex disaggregation is limited. Mostly gender programs it's a calendar driven. After that calendar, nothing happens. There's also lack of gender budget training and capacity building of decision makers, those people that are supposed to be looking at the programs or the budget with gender lens. They don't have training to do that. There's also poor institutionalization of gender responsive budget, as I've indicated that sometimes it's used just as an ad hoc process instead of being institutionalized from the planning to the budget so that the implementation can happen effectively. There's also absence of analysis of gender impact of existing revenues and expenditures at the provinces. Next slide. Some of the reasons for limited gender mainstreaming and gender budgeting at local government. It was found that it is because of the absence of an approved gender policy across municipalities, the absence of a municipal gender mainstreaming strategy. The case in point was also in the Westrand district municipalities, the Merafong as well as Mohale, while you find that they do have programs, but those programs are not institutionalized or mainstreamed into their departments. You find that there's also those that are in the personnel in management. That means those who are supposed to make decisions, as well as the budget officers who are supposed to track expenditures, have limited knowledge of how to do this so that their programs and their policies are gender mainstreaming. Also, gender equality indicators and the collection of gender disaggregated information is limited, where you find that data on water and sanitation projects, the women who are involved, the LED, the ECD, the data seems to be limited. Next slide. What the FFC did after the research was to make recommendations, as I've indicated earlier that part of its mandate is to make recommendation. So the FFC, what it did, it made recommendation where it indicated that the national and provincial government should run gender budgeting pilots in a few municipalities first and evaluate the results before wider application. These pilots could be linked to gender disaggregated data for key conditional grants. As we know that we have conditional grants on ECD, there are conditional grants for infrastructure. So FFC is of the view that if this approach can be followed, it can really do a great improvement in terms of meeting our gender equality initiatives in the country. Also, the national and provincial government should ensure municipal integrated development plans institutionalize gender planning by sector. As I've indicated, sectors such as water and sanitation, local economic development, ECD, those are the indicators that do indeed play a role in alleviating the poverty on women. And the FFC is of the view that these should also be included with the disaggregation of data, performance, and targets as to be provided for good practice guides and toolkits. Also, the national and provincial government should provide guidelines for collecting sex disaggregated data for budgeting process and ensure that municipalities have the capacity to analyze a budget from a gender perspective. After the FFC recommended this, the government response was that government support the proposal, which will ensure that the collection and allocation of public resources is effectively carried out and contributes to advancing gender equality and women's empowerment. It will provide tools to assess the different needs and contribution of men, women, boys, and girls within the existing revenues, expenditure, and allocation, and will call for adjusted budget policies to benefit all groups. At the time that this recommendation was made, the status was that the Department of Women, Youth, and Disability is engaging with National Treasury on budget and has indicators on gender-responsive budget in its strategic plans. The next slide. At the local government, the FFC recommended that the local government should institutionalize gender-responsive budget process linked to the integrated development plans. The local government should build capacity for gender mainstreaming and gender-responsive budget at the local level, where also there needs to be budget office or so that they can be able to track the expenditure on these programs. Also, the local government should ensure gender-responsive appropriation and budget allocation and should ensure gender-sensitive public participation and consultation at the local level. Government response to the FFC recommendation was that gender-responsive budget analysis along with legislation and other policy measures can indeed address gender bias and discrimination. It is a step towards increased accountability and public transparency, and it can shift economic policies leading to gains across society. However, when this recommendation was tabled, the government was of the view that the proposal implementation may be hindered by capacity constraints at the municipalities, as I've indicated that those that are in power, they lack training, and they also have limited knowledge with this. When this recommendation was tabled, there was no record of any progress after it was tabled in terms of what happened after. The next slide. In conclusion, the FFC is of the view that two key legislation that needs to be taken into account, especially at the municipal level, is the Municipal Fiscal Powers and Function Act of 2007. The next slide, Kevin, I will summarize both, as well as the Municipal Finance Management Act of 2003. The FFC is of the view that this act, it needs to be also looked at so that it includes gender mainstreaming in the acts, so that once it's done at that level, the implementation can happen effectively, because currently that is lacking. The FFC is of the view that the Women's Charter that was adopted in 1954, it can continue if some of these recommendations and some of these acts that need to be reviewed can be taken into account. And just to highlight, Chair, that FFC this year is also looking at budgeting, as we are of the view that one of the ways to address gender equality is through looking at budget. So FFC is conducting a study to look at what is happening at the budget processes, starting at the national level down to the local government level. When the budget process takes place, the gender mainstreaming included, or are they gender sensitive? Also, we'll be looking at the institutions that are supposed to be monitoring this. Are they capacitated to be able to do that, so that we are closer to meeting the commitments that we have set ourselves a long time ago. With that, Chair, I will stop. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mamonde Madugula. Let me just, before I hand over to Honorable Gillian to chair the second session, just welcome the Honorable Lehi from Northwest, a permanent delegate, and also Honorable Marihane, a permanent delegate from Limpopo. We will now move over to Honorable Gillian to chair the second session. Thank you very much once again to the presenters.
Thank you very much, Deputy Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces. The second session will be dealt with the different municipalities, and it will handle around the issue of the state of gender transformation, engendering the IDP, gender responsive budgeting, gender machinery, and progress made in implementing each article of the 1994 Women's Charter for Effective Equality. Our first municipality is Sedibeng District Municipality, and it will be represented by Councillor M. Raikani. Over to you, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Can you hear me?
Yes, you are audible, Councillor.
Thank you very much. Let me also open my video so that you can be able to see me. That's MMC Raikani. I'm the MMC for Health and Social Development in Sedibeng District Municipality. I'm just going to, I think we have my presentation. Can someone fly to the presentation for me? Thank you very much. Can we then go to page 1? The next page. The next page talks about the introduction of Sedibeng District Municipality, that is clarified as the Category C municipality by the Municipal Demarcation Board in terms of Section 4 of the Local Government Municipal Structures Act in 1998 Act of 107.
Councillor,
Yes,
if you allow me, can I please request that all members on the platform mute their mics? There is disturbing noises coming through. Please.
Okay.
You can continue, Councillor. You must unmute yourself.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The municipality was established in the year 2000 through the integration of various councils that has previously served the Vaal and the surrounding areas. The municipality is the only area in Gauteng province that is situated at the southern tip of the provinces and strategically borders 3 provinces, namely, we are just next to Free State, Northwest, and Mpumalanga. The other fact and strategic niche is that the municipality is the only one in the province that is located on the banks of the Vaal River and Vaal Dam, covering the area formerly known as Vaal Triangle. Can we then move to the next slide? Citibank strive for a non-racial, non-sexist society where gender equality and quality is observed and where transformation of gender stereotypes is addressed through eradicating poverty and hunger, achieve universal education and training, promote women empowerment, reduce child mortality, improve maternal health, combat HIV and AIDS and other diseases, ensure environmental sustainability. We also develop a provincial and national partnership for development. The next slide talks about equality. The municipality currently has gender policy to ensure that municipality is committed and willing to address gender issues. The Human Resources Department also has an employment equity policy in place to ensure there's a balance between men and women with the Sedibeng workplace. Next slide, please, where we now talk about economy. Training, we are training and capacity building for SMEs and cooperatives. 65% of women are participating. The municipality also has an EPWP program where 65% of women are also working in our EPWP. Next slide. Education and training. We have various training initiatives which are spread across different departments within the municipality. This includes the following: tourism product and skills development and tourism awareness program, in which 60% of women are also participating. For the financial year 2019-2020, we conducted capacity building training and empowerment of water resource management, which catered for women. A young woman empowerment dialogue, which was conducted as a built-up program for the launch of Sedibeng NYDA full service branch. We are having it in Everton. Next slide talks about development infrastructure and the environment. The Citibank Regional Sewer Scheme is the project which aims to develop a sustainability bulk sanitation capacity in the Citibank region. This project employs 45 women currently as we speak. Next slide talks about social services. The Department of Social Services has social development programs for women and gender in place for upliftment and empowerment women within Sedibeng community. Social services program include HIV and AIDS, ward-based education, community safety initiatives, and forums. Political and civic life. Sedibeng is the first municipality to launch the multi-party women's caucus. Its aim is to bring in all female councillors from political parties represented in council behind a unified banner of fighting against gender-based violence, abuse, and exploitation of women and children. The caucus also discusses gender mainstreaming and equal opportunities for women mainstreaming economy. Family life and partnership. We also have family law workshop that have been conducted to create awareness on gender mainstreaming, facilitated by Commission of Gender Equality and Family and Marriage Society for South Africa, which is FAMSA. Custom, culture, and religion. The Office of the Speaker conducts a Women's Month program where stakeholders were engaged through various programs and events. The municipality has a partnership with faith-based organizing where female religious and traditional practitioners participate in IDP and public participation processes. There are also various heritage and commemorative events in which the municipality has large female percentage in terms of participation and planning. Violence against women. As Sedibeng, we continue to partner with other government stakeholders for gender-based violence and human trafficking awareness campaigns as build-up program for 2016 days of activism. These campaigns are supported by the SAPS with Ukai Molau and curfew massive operations. Sedibeng will also establish and launch the first victim-friendly facility in Gauteng at the Valley University of Technology during the 16 days of activism. The anti-rape strategy was implemented in the Everton area, which significantly...
Please mute your mics, participants, please.
Can I continue, Chair?
Yes, you may, but the participants... Members, please mute your mic. There's a disturbance and the
Possibly the MMC must put off a radio.
was it the MMC's radio?
It can be a radio.
No, I don't have a radio with me here, my dear.
No, but whoever, but it seems to be a radio. They must just put off the radio.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. You can continue, MMC.
Thank you very much. Sedibeng will also establish and launch the first victim-friendly facility in Gauteng at the Valley University of Technology during the 16 days of activism. An anti-rape strategy was implemented in the Everton area, which significantly reduced related incidents in the area. When it comes to the issue of health, Citibank plays a critical coordinating role through its intergovernmental relations, which is IGR forum, namely District Health Council. Citibank District Health has a total number of 38 primary healthcare facilities, 4 community health centers, 3 community day centers, and 31 clinics. The health facility provides essential needs services to women and children in our region. With media chair, the internal and external communication departments in the municipality participated in the planning and implementation of all gender-related programs and campaigns. For every campaign, the department distribute and disseminate information on the municipality's social media platform, our website, and also the printed media. The municipality also conduct regular radio interviews on issues that affect gender, including gender-based violence. The communication departments are integral mechanism in ensuring that the Sedibeng community is well educated on matters that affect our women. When it comes to gender-based violence program director, the Sedibeng Community Safety Forum has so far implemented about 23 gender-based violence and femicide awareness campaigns. This includes marches in partnership with all police stations in the region. The municipality has conducted one-on-one sessions with 30 delegates who experienced gender-based violence, who were referred to further assistance. There are also workshops on gender-based violence education chairperson. I thank you. That's the presentation from Sedibeng District Municipality. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor, for that presentation. Our next presenter will be from the city of Johannesburg, and it will be conducted by Mr. Floyd Brink, the Chief Operations Officer. Mr. Brink, over to you. Can I just ask, given the slides in the previous presentation, you didn't move any slides. Can we just make sure that the slides have been moved, please? Do we have Mr. Brink here? Mr. Brink, are you connected?
Yes, Your Honor, we're still loading the presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Video. Thank you and good morning, honorable members. My name is Floyd Brink, Chief Operations Officer for the City of Johannesburg, the Metropolitan Municipality. I'll be presenting on behalf of the municipality. Let me start by saying thank you very much for the opportunity to present and also for this time where you've now done an assessment of this particular women's charter. So in terms of the presentation, we've got about 36 slides. I will not be going through each and every slide here. I would want to focus on some of the more important or critical slides and take your attention to that. That's in terms of our contents that we've got. We will be focusing on a brief background for the city, our gender policy, the budgeting related to the gender as well, district gender machinery, women's charter articles. We will focus on gender-based violence and our plans and programs specifically for GBV and some of the initiatives that we do have. In terms of a background, Honorable Chair, it's really just to say that it marks about 25, 26 years since we have the Women's Charter, the effective equality given this particular landmark. I will be touching on the information, and here I'm just trying to prove and show to the committee that if you look at the vision of the city is quite clear to say we are a world-class African city of the future, vibrant, equitable African city, strengthened through its diversity, a city that provides real quality of life, a city that provides sustainability for all its citizens and a resilient and adaptive society. So that is really Joburg, which we say it's my city, our future. The mission as well that you can go through, but what is important for us is that if you look at the Joburg 2040, the growth and development outcomes, that clearly that indicates to you our alignment in terms of the 11 strategic priorities, which links to financial sustainability, good governance, sustainable service delivery, economic development, job opportunity and creation, which I will also touch on during the presentation in terms of the economic opportunities for this particular presentation. Safer cities, we'll focus on active and engaged citizenry, as well as smart cities and so forth. And now, of late, we've added minimizing the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic in the city. So in terms of our gender policy itself, despite the considerable progress that we've made regarding the legal status of women, and despite the gender equality being entrenched in the Bill of Rights of the Constitution of South Africa of 1996, South African women and men do not enjoy equal rights in practice. So we are saying to the committee that we have, the COJ draft policy has been formulated in line with the relevant national and international policies, the relevant instruments, your gender policy framework of local government, and the Gauteng strategic policy framework on gender equality and local government. And that is basically to mainstream our gender in all programs and projects of the COJ. We need to promote equal opportunities and eliminate discrimination against women. We need to enable the creation of a gender-sensitive planning environment and the development of governance structures. And that for us is of utmost importance at this particular point. And this policy then seeks to achieve the following objectives. I won't read through all of them, but if you look at the second bullet, it really links to that we need to ensure that the gender needs, our priorities and differences are considered and institutionalized into the COJ policies and practices, but more importantly also our IDP. We can indicate to you, if you look at the 2021 IDP, you'll start to find some form of your GDP coming through, but more importantly, it will now start to find its way into our performance instruments as well as our operational plans as and when we move on. In terms of gender budgeting, is really an application of gender mainstreaming in the budgetary process. It means a gender-based assessment of budgets. It basically incorporates a gender perspective at all levels of the budgetary process, and also how we restructure revenues and expenditures in order to promote gender equality in the city. But the city is striving to ensure that this integration of the gender dimension happens in all phases of the budgetary cycle. That is now from the budgetary proposals over to the actual spending to the evaluation and control of the actual money that has been spent. So that is really to create that alignment between what has been budgeted and what it is that we will be spending on, and then ensure that we then have an actual picture with regard to that. It links to the issue of the efficiency and effective use of public resources. And also when the concept of gender budgeting is gradually getting integrated into the city phases of the budgetary cycle, that it is well understood in all our relevant structures, but not when we say city, we also then refer to our 12 entities that we are having. So for us, citywide then means as the core, the metro, as well as our 12 entities as well. In terms of our gender machinery, we have what we call the Gender Steering Committee, which meets on a quarterly basis. And in this particular meeting, this forum really serves within the principle of equity, promotion of the work environment that is free from elements of unfair discrimination. We are focusing and having partnerships with relevant structures and organizations. So here we are referring specifically to your Employment Equity and Skills Development Forum, Commission for Gender Equality, and that is really to build that particular capacity, and at the same time for us then to share good practices within the city and the relevant officials within the entities as well. At the bottom is really just the objectives of this particular steering committee, to create a common level of understanding amongst employees and managers within the departments. And that for us is important, so that we do not have a steering committee that is only understood at the strategic level within the organization and its entities, but it is something that should be understood and cascade down to each and every level within the organization. And the efficiency and the success of that will then be assessed based on the understanding or the clear understanding within all the different levels within the municipality and its entities. Is to redress the imbalances of the past by creating an environment that provides opportunities and resources. I will touch on the opportunity centers as well, and monitor and evaluate the gender mainstreaming through the proper implementation for COJ. We've got what we call the GOD, that focuses specifically on gender, youth, and disability mainstreaming. The committee is also at the political level. We do have it at a administrative level as well. So it does enjoy that political buy-in, and for our political leadership then also to hold us accountable and responsible to ensure that the targets that we've set through our operational plans or our business plans within the relevant departments and entities, for us then to report back at that particular committee. And that is really, if you look at it, it outlines a strategic approach for mainstreaming within the city. So that we then clear in terms of the strategy as well as the implementation thereof. And then it's basically a progressive mainstreaming of policies and guidelines. And also then for us to see what it is that we should be doing within the city or its entities, specifically relating to gender, youth, and people living with disability. In terms of our, if you look at now the articles in terms of the equality as well, it is really internally focused. Implementation of gender and disability is derived from the legislative obligation incurred by the city from the Employment Equity Act. It looks at the unequal treatment of women and persons with disability, and that remains an unfortunate reality within the world of work in the country. But I wouldn't say it is something that will specifically be a City of Joburg issue, but I think it might be, as I'm indicating on that bullet, a countrywide problem, and something that should be an alignment between the different spheres of government at a local government level, provincial government level, as well as national, so that all three spheres of government then basically pulls it into the same direction. We have consultative platforms on gender issues that have been created through various structures in the city. We have 2 gender structures that were ratified by our city manager as the main consultative structures in the city. That is a gender steering committee that I've spoken about, that basically addresses all gender mainstreaming issues within the 21 city core departments, and it also focuses on our entities. We do have also our sexual harassment task team, that is to establish, to address, and come up with measures aimed at eradicating sexual harassment in the workplace. We've got our employment, equity, and skills development forums, partnerships with the Commission for Gender Equality on gender mainstreaming. And that is really assisting us in terms of ensuring that we are compliant as a city. 52% of our training interventions for the 2021 financial year are women. In terms of our programs, I've started also to mention on it, unequal treatment remains an issue for us in the city and the country as a whole. I would want to focus on the challenges. The challenges here is that we are saying the gender policy is a progressive transition from what was a women policy, which was adopted in 2010. And then some of the initiatives, there is comprehensive consultation process inside and outside the city. So here we are saying, again, it's an issue where we would look at other spheres of government as well, and even to form any form of partnership with any other stakeholder in order for us to achieve that particular objective. In terms of law and administration of justice, in terms of priority 6, which is safer city, our public safety department is one of the key areas critical to the success of our Johannesburg 2040 GDA strategy. It relates to a safe and livable city, which is desired by all our citizens, businesses, and our visitors from a tourism perspective as well. It is largely the responsibility of government to create a secure environment. Here we are looking at what it is that we are doing from a safe city point of view, and the linkage between our safe city and our smart city principles through what we call our IIOC, where we have our law enforcement in terms of the cameras that we've got throughout our city. Some of the challenges that we have is escalating number of GBV cases that were reported. The government GBV and Femicide Command Center alone recorded more than 120,000 victims in the first 3 weeks of lockdown. These are some of the figures that we managed to get through SAPS as well. Some of the initiatives that we are looking at is 6,000 people reached on interventions to respond to the scourge of gender-based violence. We've appointed 81 nurses and doctors that we have trained in the identification of early warning signs for substance abuse and possible medical interventions. And these were some of the initiatives that we've also assisted during COVID-19. We're going to revitalize what we call the Job 10 Plus program that will be implemented in all our wards within the city. Here we are focusing on having 10 people or so within a specific ward that will help us, that will become our foot soldiers within a specific area, identify certain issues within that area, and report that straight through to our public safety, JMPD in particular, so that we ensure that we can then strengthen our bylaw or our law enforcement in general. From an economic point of view, the opportunity centers that we've got, as a city, we do have opportunity centers. And those are opportunity centers that is really a single point of entry. And it is for servicing emerging and established SMMEs and cooperatives to grow their businesses within the city. This model is really the city's intervention to contribute to the development and support of SMMEs and cooperatives. Some of the offerings within that centers that we are having across all the 7 regions that we've got in the city, it's really focusing on training services, which includes business management, business planning, business idea generation, supply chain training, and also marketing strategies. The focus here really, honorable members of this committee, is that we are saying we need to provide those training services to targeted groups so that we are sure that whatever it is that we are doing, it should then start from the lowest level up to the highest level. So it's one thing to start a business, but it's another thing to ensure that you sustain that particular business. So we are providing that service that will help you from a startup phase throughout the business, financial management, the bookkeeping part of it, and more importantly, people management. We've got consultation services there, whereby we are providing one-on-one consultation services. We've got experts that have been trained in particular fields, which then helps our clients, which are the community at large, then to specifically focus on relevant business support services, the opportunities that we are providing, and also better access in terms of funding and linking specific communities or clients, in this case, to other spheres of government. So we are trying to bridge that gap through our community outreach programs, especially serving the poor in this regard. We've got facilities usage for businesses as well, access to boardroom use for businesses, that is for meetings and presentations, as well as interviews and so forth. We are providing free Wi-Fi throughout the city and some of the areas within our regions as well. This is quite a busy slide, but I think one would want to spend a little bit more time on it because this really links to the SMME development programs. And if you look at what we've done for Q2 2020-21 financial year in terms of our plans, in terms of that training programs, it's really to start up emerging SMMEs and cooperatives across all sectors owned by youth, women, and people with disabilities. We are saying this process is, will target about 200 women. The inception is in October 2020. We will be completing that by December 2020, so it will happen in the second quarter. But the expected outcome that we are really looking at is to improve the level of business skills for SMMEs and cooperatives by preparing them to run their businesses effectively, providing the SMMEs and the cooperatives with the necessary skills to sustain the businesses is exactly what I just spoken about in the previous slide. Access to information, and that is really, again, we would want to encourage entrepreneurship and innovation in all our communities and our city regions, so that you have an SMME that is better informed in terms of how to gain that in-depth knowledge of how to run that particular company. And that will be then financial as well as non-financial support. And that will be offered by us as government and different stakeholders that we are partnering with. The third one is really access to the market, because it's one thing for you to start a business, but it's another for you then to know how to get business and for you to then sell your product or your service that you're offering. So in this regard, we then access to various procurement opportunities through facilitation of the CSD, ensuring that all those SMMEs understand how the city works in terms of with our entities, linked to the panels that we have, linked to our procurement opportunities, and how we are aligning ourselves in terms of the relevant legislation within the city. And those are the opportunities that we are then providing them and looking at different SMME models for the city and how we then look at, as we are moving forward, we are about to finalize a process when we look at SMME empowerment and that compulsory 30% to be subcontracted to specific people within a specific area, so that we are then sure that we stimulate the economy in that particular area. So it's almost like saying stimulating what we call like a village economy, so that the money then circulates within a particular area. And that for us is also important. But for that, we are still saying we need a consistent view between the different spheres of government, a consistent approach, so that we do not have something that duplicates the work of province or national, or where there will be certain gaps or cracks between the different spheres. Important is access to finance that we are providing. Here, our expected outcomes is really to look at how do you then partner with the development financial institutions, the DFIs, such as your National Youth Development Agency, your Gauteng Enterprise Propeller, and so forth. So this is really to provide some skills and training specifically on how to gain access, one, to the market, two, how then to access funding to ensure that level of sustainability from a startup phase of the SMME, the company itself or the business, up to a point where it then becomes sustainable and it can then run on its own. But for that, like I've mentioned earlier, you would then provide that financial management and business management training as well. Cooperative development, here the expected outcome is what we're looking at is also the target is 50 women, facilitation of cooperative compliance to ensure that they comply with the necessary regulations. And here it's also to ensure compliance from the point of view with other spheres of government and relevant legislation, laws, regulations, and or prescripts or directives as set by other departments like your Department of Labor, Department or your national or provincial treasury. So that compliance for us is then also quite important. This is the last slide on the economy part. That is the training programs. Challenges is that the city does not really have a specific funding to assist women. But what we are saying as part of our current budgets that we are having, we are tailor-making all our interventions through our SMMEs and with our current budgets that we are having. And we are saying is, as with the current budget that we are having, it is just a specific way in which you're going to interpret it. It's a specific way that you're going to manage it and how you're going to implement your project. So on this one, we can indicate to you, we can have figures available that will indicate specifically the SMME development that we had in the previous year for women, as well as for broadly within our city or the specific regions as well. In terms of education and training, empowerment of women and achieving gender equality through the city skills development. This is really just a slide that indicates, if you look at the blue at the bottom, that is employed, and the orange is unemployed. The training and development for women, it's about 3,000. Males for employed, 2,776. From the unemployed side, it's 509 women and 436 males. The challenges here, again, it's an issue of budget provisioning, the organizational part of us, but also culture impacting almost, I wouldn't want to say a resistance to change, but it's a new way of doing things. So it then also requires some form of change management within our organization. And this is something that we are working on quite drastically at this point. We can indicate that some of our initiatives specifically for this is that we are having now key performance indicators on skills development processes that has been included in some of our HOD scorecards. We know that we might not have included it to the level at which we should, but it's a work in progress for us, and an assessment and a session of this nature will then assist us to take it forward and then make it regulatory on our side to say that from a gender point of view, your GBV and our women charter and the relevant pillars within there, or the outcomes, will then find expression in the relevant performance scorecards of the head of departments within the city and its entities, our executive directors, up to the point of the accounting officer. Already those clusters from a GOD point of view, already that is part of some of the performance scorecards as well. But if it's not in a scorecard, you will then find it in our operational plans, and we do have then a way to assess it through our Department of Social Development and working with our corporate services and economic development, and that in itself should then provide us with a clear indication of how we are faring in terms of the targets that we have set. There are directives from the city manager to HODs to ensure budget provision. We are going to a mayoral hotline the next week or two. We will be looking at this even at mid-year adjustment. This was slightly a different year in terms of our start linked to COVID. So that is part of unprecedented waters, uncharted waters. So we had to look at our budget slightly differently in terms of planning perspectives. Our target setting for the year was also slightly different. And as we are now moving forward, we will be looking at midterm budgets and some of the adjustments that we will be focusing on. In terms of the last bullet there, from Women's Development Program, we are targeting about 60 middle managers that will be rolled out during this particular period or this financial year. Skills development for the unemployed community members, we are looking at a total of 2,696, broken down into 895 for male, 1,801 females. There you can see, even in terms of the actual figures and the previous slide, we are looking at the training and development with specific targets that we have set for the city. Challenges that we've got is that some of the skills centers are not fully utilized. That is something that we are working on from within management as well. Failure to secure more funding from our SETAs. And that is something where we are saying we would need the assistance of this particular committee to help us so that we then, from other spheres of government, so that we benefit as a city to gain access on that funding, and we should be able then to roll out that in terms of our skills and training and development programs within the city. Failure to place learners for practical learning. And then the last bullet on the challenges is COVID-19 made it impossible to reach our planned target. This really, as I've indicated, as part of social distancing and the regulations as set by our health department and the World Health Organization, we then had to ensure that we align ourselves to those regulations and those particular restrictions that we had to look at. Some of the initiatives we will be focusing on IT, jewelry making, occupational health and safety learnerships, women in construction learnership. Our call centers will be aligned.
You already.
Thank you, Chair. I will be moving with speed. As I'm moving to the next slide, Article 5 is the development, infrastructure and environment. Here we are just focusing on the expanded social package, which is a basket of benefits which the city allocates to its most vulnerable citizens. Here we will continue to focus on it, upgrading of women's hostel renewal building alterations. In Alex Extension 52, we do have some challenges that you can maybe just touch on there. From a social services point of view, the city's Department of Social Development's core mandate is to design and provide early intervention services that enable indigent individuals, families, and groups to access the social support services. Chair, I need to indicate to you, these are some of the things that we really saw happening during COVID-19, and we do have the figures as we are moving forward to indicate what the rollout was for the city in particular. Some of the programs, it's Young Women's Program, Women and Men's Forums, the expanded social package, food resilience programs, and so forth. The challenges that we've got, high level of women unemployment rate, it is something that we now need to say we need to be unapologetic in how we design our projects and programs so that we have specific targets that we will be looking at. The rise of gender-based violence and femicide is still a problem to us. We will be looking at a strategy on GBV and femicide is developed and already implemented within the city, and we are reporting to our GOD that I've also mentioned earlier. From a political and civic life, here the city has a GOD Section 79 committee with the following functions. It's reviewing, monitoring, and evaluating our departmental policies. It's looking and reviewing and monitoring of city plans and budgets. It's considering quarterly and annual departmental reports as well. The standing committees have been established to deal with council-related matters. These committees have decision-making powers as per the TORs and are chaired by our councillors as well. So that assists us then to cascade it to that level at ward base. From a family, life and partnership point of view, yeah, we are just focusing on some of the challenges is the linkages of cash and care, positive discipline and so forth. Chair, with your permission, I would want us to go into the slide specifically on Article 10, violence against women. Here we are saying the city developed its slide 23, the city developed its first comprehensive and integrated multi-agency strategy, the Johannesburg City Safety Strategy, the JCSS. The strategy drew from the analysis contained in the COJ's Long-Term Economic Development Strategy, Joburg 2030, the National Crime Prevention Strategy, NCPS of 1998, White Paper on Safety and Security. Violence, through revising the JCSS and COJ aims to provide a framework to guide specific interventions and plans, ensuring continuity in the COJ's work in improving the city's safety. We want to recommit to strengthen interagency initiatives, improve the relationship between our JMPD, EMS, and disaster management, and the city citizens through consistent demonstration of responsive, community-orientated, effective service delivery, promote joint community COJ ward-based safety planning, and so forth. I would quickly want to move into slide 26. As part of our programs, I mentioned sexual harassment task team earlier, the gender-based violence and femicide programs that we do have. We've established the establishment of a shelter for victims of GBV, Young Women's Program, establishment and support of Men and Women's Forum, But some of the challenges here, the rising number of the GBV statistics, is the coordination of the different spheres of government, private sector, NGOs, and civil society. We believe as a city, if we can have a slightly better coordination, we should be able to enhance our efforts in ensuring that we start to address the issue of GBV. We will be intensifying the GBV response plan, a strategic plan from our side, the establishment of the GBV advisory committee, and the policy to ensure that our scorecards of executive heads clearly indicates then specific targets for GBV as well. The last slide is really focused on health, indicating that the city, Joburg, we have 79 municipal owned clinics, 78 fixed and 1 satellite. We also have some mobile clinics. And this is all what we are using. As and when there's specific emerging hotspots, we are then using those emerging hotspots, looking at different issues within the city, and we then start to deploy our resources in a specific area. The following slides are just focused.
Mr. Floyd, I am sorry, but you have expired very much over your time. Your time has expired long time ago.
Thank you, Chair. But there's some detail on the other slides that you can maybe just read through. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Floyd. We will now move to the Westrand municipality. One of the few women municipal managers, the acting municipal manager of Westrand, Ms. Masibiko. Ms. Masibiko, are you ready? We just need Zoleka to remove the slide from the screen of City of Joburg. Thank you.
No, it's connection here.